If you know a little bit about Fusion and you want to pump your skills up a little bit, especially on the animation game, the motion graphics game, you're going to love this. Here's what we're making today. Yeah. Nice little animation. We have this little cartoony button. Cursor comes in, clicks it. We have this little fancy little star thingy. Has a little kind of squash animation. Yeah, it's nice, huh? It's nice. You wanna learn how to do some of that? Let's go. Long story short, this is happening in a few different pieces here on the edit page. First, we have our background. This is just a 4-color gradient made in the edit page. You can find that under generators, 4-color gradient, and you just drag that in. Okay. Select it, go to the inspector, and switch these colors around until it makes something you like. I'm just going to alt drag this because I like it how it is. Next thing is the button. So you could make all of this stuff into one comp. There's nothing wrong with doing that. I decided to make this as separate layers just because it's a little bit easier to mess with the timing in the edit page rather than the Fusion page. Really depends on kind of what you're doing. If you're just making this one animation, might be great to have this in layers. If you're wanting to make this into a template that you reuse and you just drag it onto one thing, maybe you want to make it all in Fusion. Either way, whether you build this in parts like I'm doing or you put it all in one comp, it's going to work in a very similar way. We have this button and that kind of gets pushed and squashed. Then we have the little blip animation, adds a little bit of pizzazz to the click here. And then we have the actual click, which is just this cursor coming in and kind of scaling down for a second while it clicks. Put these all together. It looks nice. So first thing I'm going to do is go up to the media pool, right click, and let's say new Fusion composition, and we'll make the button. So button, and then we'll double click on this composition. And now we have it open in the Fusion page. One thing I like to do in Fusion is right click on the background in the flow here, go to Arrange Tools and make sure to check to grid, because then this kind of snaps to the grid, just makes things a little bit nicer. I'm going to start with a background. So I'll grab this background and bring this in and connect it to media out. That'll give us a black screen. We're actually going to want this clear. So let's take the alpha down on this black background. And now we have a clear background. Now let's make the button. You could make the button 100 different ways. One way to do it is with shapes. So let's go up to our effects panel. I'll twirl down tools and go down to shape. And here we have all of our shape tools. I'm going to start with a shape rectangle. And we're going to need a shape render. Pipe this into the render, pipe the render over the background. And now we have a white square over a blank background. Let's take this rectangle and we're going to adjust the width and height. This is going to be kind of the main body of the button. Let's just do something like that. And I'm also going to mess with the corner radius here. We'll pump that up so it has those rounded corners. Looks good. Maybe make this a little bit wider, something like that. And this time, I don't know, let's make a pink button. Kind of do something like that. Take this down just a touch. Hit OK. Now we have this kind of pink body to the button. Now to make this button look 3D, we're going to duplicate this shape and kind of add a darker edge right here. So I'll take this rectangle shape and I'll just hit Control C and then Control V. And what that'll do is add a new shape here with a shape merge. And here in the foreground, we're just going to leave this one pink. In fact, I'll even rename this. I'll hit F2 to rename it. And we'll call this pink. This one right here we'll call dark pink. We'll take this dark pink and here in the controls, let's take this offset and move it down a little bit. Just so it's down a little bit. And under style, we'll take this and make it a little darker. I'm also going to kind of push it a little more purple. That looks good. And now we have this kind of darker edge right there. It looks like it's kind of an extruded button. Just a quick kind of cartoony way to do that. The other thing I like to do is add a brighter edge on the top. So let's take one of these, doesn't matter which, I'll hit Control C, double click out in the middle of nowhere and hit Control V, and we'll rename this bright. And as for our color, let's just make this kind of a little brighter and less saturated and hit OK. And what we're going to do is merge the pink and the bright together. So let's take the dark pink here and we'll put the bright pink over the dark pink. and then the regular pink over both of those. Let's take the bright one and move it up just a touch. We do like that. We could also bring this down and just light that edge, and that would look good too, like this. That looks kind of nice too. Whatever you want to do. Have some kind of little edge there, and this would totally work. But what we're eventually going to want to do is animate the top of this button to kind of push down and squish this edge and make the edge a little bit less tall. And so what we might want to do is actually do this a little different. Let's go ahead and put the bright and the pink together like this. And then we'll merge both of those over a dark pink. And we'll have the same result, but now we'll be able to move the bright edge and the pink together separately from the dark edge. So if we do like a shape transform and drag this in between here, if I move this around, we're moving kind of the top part of the button without moving the bottom part of the button. So now what we can do if we grab this Y offset is I can pretty much control the height of the button with this X offset. So we can have a really tiny button or a really big, tall, thick button, right? And we can animate this to make it look like it's pressed. So if I push this way, it goes and we press the button. Pretty cool. So let's go ahead and rename this transform. I'll call this press_XF for transform. And we have our sort of little animation rig set up here. Something to mention is that a shape merge can actually merge multiple shapes together. You don't have to just have a foreground and a background, but I like to still kind of use a foreground and a background because it's easier to tell where things are in the flow. Whereas if I connected all of these to one merge, it's hard to tell kind of what is in front of what here. And it's just more work to remember it. So instead of doing that, we'll just do it kind of how like normal merges work and just use two inputs. Next thing we want to do is make a little play icon here. And I'm going to put this right before our press transform because I want a play icon to stick on the top of this button with this kind of pink face and the brighter edge. So let's grab an N-gon and we'll merge this over our top edge like this. And let's take the N-gon and we're just going to go down to 3 sides, which look at that is a triangle that looks like a play button. You see what we're doing here? Cool. We'll take the width down and the height down just to make our little play icon like this. Again, you could do this a lot of different ways. You could import a play icon of some kind, but I like it just like that. That works pretty well. This looks like a nice little play button. And under style, let's take this white, make it a little darker. I don't know, just so it's not bright white. In fact, we could even maybe do like a pink, darker pink kind of, yeah, I like that. So now there's the little play button looking sweet. So now we have our nodes kind of set up here. Let's rename this play icon. And we have our entire button built here out of shapes. And remember, all of these shapes have to go to a shape render, and then that's turned into a 2D layer, which is merged over our background. So now we have our play button all set up. Let's go ahead and animate it, assuming that we're going to add a cursor coming in and clicking this. Let's just go at 30 frames. So after, about a second or so, we're going to animate this little press. So I'm going to grab this press transform, and here under Y offset, let's make a keyframe. And then I'll move just 2 frames to the left just by clicking left on the keyboard a couple times. And I'll set a keyframe there, and we'll go 4 frames to the right. So we set a keyframe there. So really what we have right now are 3 identical keyframes that are 2 frames apart. And this middle one, that's where we're going to have this press down. So we'll grab this offset and we'll push it down a little bit like that. And now that push animation is happening. Very nice. So now we have our animated button. Let's go back to the edit page, and over our background here, let's take our button and I'm going to drag this down into the layer above our background. And now we have our button. It gets pushed down right there at 30 frames. And just to make things easier later, I'll go here, select this clip and hit M on the keyboard so that I know that's where the click happens. Now let's make the animation of our cursor coming in here. Again, I'll right click up here in the media pool, new fusion composition, hit create. We'll call this cursor and double click on this to open up in Fusion. And again, we'll start with a blank background and I'll make it empty. I'll go to the media pool and I'm going to use a cursor PNG that I got off the internet. And I'll just drag this in from the media pool and that'll make a media in. And this is what it looks like. We'll take this and just merge it over our background like that. And we're going to set this up so we can animate it really well. First, let's call this cursor_mi for media in. Then let's make a transform. And we'll call this cursor_xf for cursor transform. And we'll take this transform and take the size down quite a bit. Maybe something like that. The reason why I'm adjusting this in a transform and not resizing this image or animating it in the merge is because it's easier to see what's going on in the flow if we have this broken out as a separate node. It might seem like overly complicated, but it's probably about the same amount of work. It's just easier to tell what's happening in the flow. So why not? So we're going to take this cursor transform and we're also going to do our animation based on that. So right at frame 30, let's have this cursor right here in the middle. That's where we want it. I'll go over here to center and set a keyframe. And before that, we're going to have this kind of come off screen like this. So now it comes in here, bloop, like that. But I don't want this just to go straight in. I kind of want it to swoop in. So what I'll do is select both of these keyframes like this, and I can grab the handle here of this bottom keyframe and just have this kind of swoop, make this swooping motion like that. There we go. Great. I also want this cursor to slow down before it gets here to this end keyframe, which I can adjust that in the spline. So these handles right here adjust the actual kind of values of where this is going to be, but the spline panel, this is how fast it moves, right? So this is more of the timing. So this last keyframe right here, I'm going to hit F on the keyboard to flatten that out so that this, as it approaches the end, slows down a little bit before it stops. Great. And we'll actually have this come in a little bit quicker. I'll take this keyframe and move it this way and let it stop for 5 frames or so. There we go. So it swoops in and stops. And then right at frame 30, that's where we want this click to happen. Now, we could do the animation here in this transform, but there's a couple problems with that. One is this is kind of one big movement. And if I don't need to, I don't really want to mix a bunch of animation stuff all in one node. If I kind of break things out, then it's really easy for me to find problems later and stuff. And the other thing is that the pivot of this node is set in the middle of the cursor. When this clicks, I want this to kind of get smaller, but I want it to get smaller from this upper left-hand corner, which also happens to be the middle of our screen. And if I add another transform right here, guess where it puts that pivot? Right there in the middle, which is a good thing. So if I take that size, that's going to kind of size my cursor up and down. So let's go ahead and just rename this click XF for click transform. And right here at 30, that's where we're going to do our click. And we'll just animate the size. And again, let's take this 2 frames to the left and 2 frames to the right. And then right here in the middle, this is where we're going to size this down just a touch. Boop, like that. So now we have, it comes in and goes boop, like that. Oh, beautiful. Perfect. Okay, so now we have our cursor animation. Again, this is stuff that we could have done in our button comp, but if we have these broken out as separate pieces, we could use this same animation to click on something else later if we want to. And it's also really easy to move the timing around. Like this is going to happen to just work out fine. But if we wanted this click to happen later, I can push this cursor down and we can kind of adjust that here in the edit page without having to go in and mess with a bunch of keyframes. We can kind of just move these around, which is a nice way to work. But this click, we did some good planning. So it happens at 30 frames and it already looks pretty good. So this is good. We could leave it like that, but really it'd be great to have some juice here. That means kind of something fancy on top of this. Let's go ahead, go to the media pool, right click and say new fusion composition. This one we're going to call click animation and double click on that. And again, new background and we'll make it clear. And this time we're going to use some fancy shape effects. So let's go into the effects panel and under tools, under shape, we're going to start with a rectangle shape and a shape render, and we'll merge this over. And this rectangle, let's take the height down quite a bit and the width, just make kind of a little bar like that. And I'll up the corner radius all the way. Now we have this kind of a rounded rectangle here. And what we're really trying to do is make kind of a star, kind of an asterisk sort of shape to start out with. And we could copy and paste this and then turn it and copy and paste it and turn it. But there's actually a really cool shape effect called sDuplicate. If we grab this and run that rectangle through that duplicate effect, we can give this a rotation offset. So let's do like 60, and copies, let's do 2 copies. And now we have this Ameritrade logo. I don't know. There's some kind of asterisk logo. If you know what I'm talking about, put it in the comments. Anyway, we're making this, and let's also make copies that are kind of smaller as well, but we'll have kind of spokes in between these. We could actually just do another duplicate like this, and we'll offset this by 30. We'll do 1 copy, and we'll also adjust the size. So let's do like 0.8. And now we have kind of this little snowflake looking thing. That'll work just fine. And what's cool about going through these 2 duplicate effects is that we can adjust this original rectangle and it will ripple out to everything else. So let's make it a little bit smaller like that. And now we have this cool little thingy. Now, if we want to animate this, let's go ahead and just start this at 0 and we'll have it pop in. Yeah, we'll take about a second or so to animate this. And we'll just animate this rectangle, animate the width right here. And we'll have that be there at 30 frames. And then at 0 frames, we'll take the width all the way down. So now this just kind of grows like that. That looks nice. Ploof. I think we want that a little bit quicker. So we can open up the keyframes, grab this and move that over to, I don't know, 15 or so. So now like that. Open up the spline panel and we'll grab this end keyframe and hit F on the keyboard to flatten that out. And now it grows nicely. Okay, so that's part of it, but we also want the inside to kind of grow. And there's a bunch of ways we could do that, but I think what we'll do is just a simple mask. And let's take a ellipse mask like this, and we'll just pipe this into shape render. We could also do this in the merge, and I'll grab the edge of it like that and see it's going to limit where that renders. So let's invert this. And now you see where we're going here? You see what we're doing? Okay. So right about where this stops, so like frame 15, let's take this ellipse and let's do this like frame 25 or so. Just a little bit after the first animation's done. We'll have this all the way out so that it masks out everything. And we'll animate the width and height right here. And then at like 10 or so, we'll take this down so that it's at 0. So now we should have something going on here. There we go. That works. Nice. I like it. So that's not a lot of work and it looks pretty cool. This again, let's take this ellipse and grab the spline panel and we'll grab the second keyframe in the animation and hit F so that it has that nice kind of slowing down, easing effect like that. Yeah, that looks nice. Now to make this just a little bit nicer, let's add a circle shape in between. And we'll just do this after the merge here. We'll just do this as another kind of layer. So I'll grab shape ellipse and shape render and merge those over. And this ellipse, let's not make it solid. Let's have the border about like that. And we'll have the width and the height scale down. And this is actually kind of a weird thing. With a mask, you can grab the corner edge and scale it, but with an ellipse shape, for some reason you can't. Here's a quick solution if you want to scale something to proportions, and if you just have a width and height slider. This height, what I'll do is just hit equals and then return. And then I can take this little pick whip thing and connect it to the width and hit enter. And now whenever I adjust the width, it will adjust the width and the height. So we're just going to kind of keyframe this to be just right. So we'll start right about here. We'll turn that down a little bit like that. In fact, maybe we'll just go to the left a couple frames, make width at 0. And then I'm just going to page through this a little bit. And right here, right before the edges completely disappear, we're going to bring this width out to be about right. Something like that. So now this kind of grows along with our animation. And I'm also going to have this fade out. So in this merge right here, which controls the transparency of this circle that we're putting over everything, I'm going to animate the blend. So right here where I want this to be completely gone, I'll make a keyframe and just blend this all the way down. And then when I want to be able to see this, let's say right about here, I'll take the blend all the way up. So now this is going to fade out as it goes. So we still get a little bit of that cool kind of circle, but it fades out as it animates. So now we have bloop. That's cool. I think what we'll do is ease the keyframe on that width as well. Select that last keyframe and hit F on the keyboard. Now we have this little thing happening. The only problem is that we don't have a gap in between the mask and the shape anymore. So what we can do is just probably mess with our keyframes here. I'll go ahead and turn off our spline, and I'll select our ellipse, both our ellipse masks right here, just so I can see them both. I'll take this ellipse mask and move this down a touch. Just move it down a couple frames so that it happens a little later. There we go. Very nice. Okay, let's see how this looks. Oh, baby. I like it. The only thing left is I want this whole thing to turn a little bit, which we can do easily, again, with the transform. So I'll just grab a transform, drag that down after everything. That's going to turn our background too, but it really doesn't matter because our background is completely empty. Take this transform, and I could animate the angle here, but it's really doesn't have to be anything specific. We just want this to turn the whole time. So here where it says angle, I'll just say equals time. And what that's going to do is set my angle to my frame count, which happens to be about right for what we want here. That won't always work. Sometimes we'll have to divide it or multiply it or whatever, but with rotation, that works okay. So now it kind of rotates as it animates, and it looks like we spent a bunch of time doing some crazy stuff, but it wasn't too bad. I think one thing I'll do is take this rectangle and take the height down a little bit just to skinny this out a little. And same thing with our ellipse. Take the border width down a touch. Now it's just a little less bold. Yeah, I like that. A little more kind of minimal. Yeah. And now that we have that, let's switch back over to edit. And now I'll take this click animation, and that animation is going to fire right here on this first frame. And so we want that to happen right as we click. So now as we click, blink, it's happening. Couple problems. One is this is way too big. The second one is that it's over our cursor. So let's take our cursor and bring that up. Take our click animation, bring it down. So that's one problem. And we can take our click animation, and here in the edit page, let's just turn on our transform controls, and we can adjust that and move that around. Again, this is all stuff that you could mess with in the Fusion page, but it's easy and real time to kind of do it in the edit page. And so why not? See now, that's cool. Bloop. Nice. One other little bit here. Let's add a drop shadow to our button. And again, we can do this in the Fusion page, or we can do it in the edit page. I think for this, let's just go to Open Effects and type in drop. That'll give us our drop shadow. And we'll take this drop shadow and put it on the button. And that's going to cast this little shadow on the background. I'll select the button, go up to the inspector under Effects, and let's take the drop distance down a little bit like that. And we can animate this drop distance with the click of our button and give that even a little bit more character. And I can copy this first keyframe. I'll move this over. 0.26. And I'll just paste that in. And so now that shadow animates with the movement of our button. So as we push it down, the shadow goes down. And as it comes back up, the shadow comes back up. And the click starts this little click animation. And it looks really nice. Look at that. And now we have our cool little animation. Isn't that awesome? Sweet. Baby, wasn't that fun? I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that you learned a whole lot about how Fusion works and how to animate stuff, make some graphics. Hey, do you have any graphics ideas? Well, why don't you just put them in the comments and maybe I'll think about making a thing about them or something. I don't know. I hope this tutorial pushed all the right buttons. Hiya.